Hi, I'm Ali Hargreaves and we've just recorded my live demo of painting a rhododendron in 30 minutes. But unfortunately there was a little bit of a glitch at the beginning, so what we're doing is just reintroducing the fact that I am painting a rhododendron. So first of all I'm going to show you a photograph and we're going to observe the flower and I'm going to show you how to draw it out. First of all, let's look at that line, that main vein coming through, and I can see that sort of line. So bring that across, get the line in there and just draw that on with the red colour crayon. Then let's look at the angle of that one and just pop that on. We've got this one at that angle. So just 3 lines to start with. And then we've got the top. So before I put those, I just want to get this idea of here where the stamens are coming from. It's just a curve. You know, to do this on the actual photograph, it can help. I'm just going to get that idea of the curve there. Proportion is really important. So let's just look at the proportions. What we see of that petal is where it's curved over. It's not the whole petal, it's just a bit of it. But I need to just check how long that is compared to this. 1, twice. That's more or less twice there. So if I get this petal in first, it's just, you know, about kind of, if I think about a clock, we've got, you know, a clock here, that's 12 o'clock, it's slightly about 11 o'clock. So slightly 11 o'clock, that's where that petal starts. Let's put the angles on first. So the angle is there. Let's put that angle on. Shorter this time, because they're shorter at the top, and then one there. And I know it starts here. So the first petal is important. This is going to, you know, make sure that everything's in proportion compared to this petal. So it curves round, it's, you know, quite wide. So I'm going to pop it round and curve this round. If it doesn't work on your first one, you know, if you're painting along with me, it's quite tricky because I have only got 30 minutes. So it might be better just to watch and then watch it again later. But if you are doing it with me live, don't worry if it's not perfect. It's about learning. So I've got that petal. I'm just going to check. That's the size. So we need once, twice. That's how long the next petal is. That gets the proportions right. And let's look at the others. You know, this one from there is the same. So that's how long it is. From there, it's the same. It goes to about there. And similar with the other one. 1, 2. So that just gives me an idea about where it's going to finish. Now I can look at the shape. So where does this overlap? Look at the negative shape in between. We've got a bit of a V shape. So that will help me, that V shape there. And then it's quite lumpy, it goes round, around here, and round like that. And look at that wavy, beautiful wave we've got coming round like that. Then we've got the other petals to put on. Where do they start? This one, you know, starts where this petal is about halfway or even less than halfway. So about here. And it comes down at an angle. Sorry. Got that wrong. There's a petal here. You know, it really doesn't matter if you get it wrong. Look back again. So it's actually this part. This is a part of the petal. So a little bit further down from here. It comes out and then it has a little bit coming over there, a bit wiggly, going round like that and in. Now again, let's look at the negative shape. This negative shape comes here. Look at that green shape rather than the pink shape. So I'm going to draw that negative shape on first, then I'm going to carry on with the petal. Now I can see from here that I've gone too long with that petal. It's not a problem. I just need to rectify it before I start painting. So I'm going to bring that up. I was looking at the negative shape. That helped me work out where I'd got it wrong. So this line, don't need that. I can paint over it. It's not a problem. So I come round like this, up, and then again I'm going to look at the negative shape here. It looks a bit like, what's it, the Matterhorn, the top of the Matterhorn mountain there. And coming down at an angle, and this comes round like that. So we've got the main shape of the flower just by looking at it, getting the proportions right, and that sort of thing. It's not perfect, but it'll do. It's a free painting, so we're going to be going over some of that later anyway. I'm just going to make that a bit more defined. Okay, so now we can put the leaves on, and I'm going to use the green crayon for this. These are Inktense pencils, but any watercolour crayon will do something similar. So now I'm looking at the leaf. Again, let's see where it comes in. You know, we've got this negative shape here that looks a little bit like a very wobbly vase. So a very wobbly vase on here. That is the start of my leaf shape. Then the leaf is about 6 o'clock. You know, if we think of a clock, so about 6 o'clock here, it comes round and it goes off the page. And then there's a curve here. We've got a bit of a vein coming through there. We've got another leaf coming down here, which is quite pointy. So again, look at the shape. I say, I apologise for the speed of this, but we have got a 30-minute restriction on doing this. And it just shows what you can do in 30 minutes. Amazing. So that's got my main things in, just looking at the veins. We've got lines coming, curving across, almost horizontally across. Then just getting the idea about where those are and drawing those on with the green pencil. And some opposite. You know, observation is key. Where are they? They're almost opposite. And they come down at an angle like that. That gives the shape of the leaf if you put those on as they are. So that's it. We've got a few on here. And that will do. Now, when we look at the petals, we can see on here these veins coming up here. So this is the actual picture that we're going to end up with, and you can see some wax resist going on there. So I'm going to put that on using a wax crayon. These are great because they're really sharpened well. I'm just going to put a few on, then I'm going to put some yellow over the top and do a few more. So you can't actually see where I'm going, but I am looking at the curve that we've got on there and the lines that we've got, just, you know, putting a few on, not too many. I'm not bothering with the bottom because that's a little bit darker. And now we can start painting. So get your big brush out. This stops us getting too detailed. It also helps us to get a lot of paint on quickly when we've got a time limit. So I'm going to start with this lovely colour, Permanent Rose. I'm making it wet in the palette. And I'm going to go round the edge of this, but I want that to be quite light. So I'm leaving a bit of white of the paper and I'm just going up like this. And then I'm going to add some water, get rid of the excess water and just bring that round to make it lighter around there to the edge. Leaving a little bit here, so just going to add water so that becomes light. And it's just doing that lovely wet and wet thing. Look at that. Whilst it's still wet, let's get some Q gold, as I call it, quinacridone gold. I'm mixing it in the palette, nice and wet and light, because this is what makes the peach. Now I'm going to go up with that. Look at that, it's such a lovely rich colour. Perfect for autumn, this colour, really beautiful. I was so pleased when the SAA brought this colour out. It's one of my favourites, especially this time of year. If you want it to be more vibrant, you could always add a little bit more of the Permanent Rose, but it's already starting to dry a bit. I'm going to use the wax crayon now in the wet paint just to show that you can do that, and some of the yellow will then show up later when I go over it. So just a few lines. You can already see the wax resist showing through there. The little veins coming off, so I'm just going to put some of those on. So as I say, I'm using this in wet paint, but it does work. Still dry it off when you've finished. And now I'm going to go onto the bottom petals. So I've got some Permanent Rose, but this time I'm going to use it almost straight from the tube thickness, really strong like that. Bring it out, that nice and strong. Wet the brush, dry it off just once and pull that colour out. My goodness, I'm looking at the time ticking away so quickly. So that's my petal there. That's where I went slightly wrong with the green. Look at the way that that's spreading out. Absolutely gorgeous. Going to use my number 6 now to add some alizarin crimson, which is a darker colour. I'm going to pop that in. So I want that to be much darker in the middle. I'm just pulling it out like that. And there. And now I can see the yellow on the side, so I'm going to use some Q gold, and again I'm going to add that in whilst it's still wet. Beautiful colour. Just bring it out like this. It was very vibrant, you know, this flower was really vibrant. Wetting wet is the key to getting that really lovely freeness to the painting. I'm now going to add some Viridian. Viridian and alizarin crimson will make almost black, and I'm using it quite strongly to get a really dark line there. Then I'm going to add some water to again have that wet and wet coming through. Yep. Then whilst it's still wet, and it really needs to be still wet, I'm going to add these little dots here, and I'm going to use Brusho. This Brusho is called Rose Red. I really love the colour because it's quite a pinky colour, and look at that, it's just perfect for some dots. Put that all over there. Gorgeous. You know, but remember, this does show later, and a little goes a long way, so be careful. Just putting a few sprinkles on there, because I'm going to show you what to do with that later. Now we need to start picking out the leaves. So back to my wash brush, I'm now going to use some Hooker's green, but you know, you might just want to use a different green. It really doesn't matter as long as it's a dark green. You can mix it using Prussian blue or whatever. I'm going to go all the way down here. I'm leaving a line there. I could use my wax resist in there to make that lighter there, and then I can go over it and go right into the cranny there. Now this paint is still wet, but this is a free painting, so I'm not worrying about that coming out. You know, it makes it interesting. Then I'm going to use a little bit of Viridian to make it a little bit bluer, mixing these colours together. Beautiful. Look at that, really lovely. And here's another technique for you. So I'm going to use the crayon, the watercolour crayon, to put those veins back on whilst it's still wet. It's a really lovely thing. It kind of glides through when you use a watercolour crayon. And these coming down. And because I'd already looked at it, I've already observed it, I know where they go. So that's quite useful. I'm going to use the alizarin crimson now to make it a little bit darker in places, and also to bring the red of the flower into the leaf. It just makes it more interesting, but don't do too much mixing, otherwise you will end up with a muddy colour. Red and green make brown at the end of the day, so you don't want that. But I do want this colour to be very dark. When you look at the photograph, we can see how dark it is here and here. So very, very strong mix, hardly any water. I'm using Viridian on here around the outside of the leaf, and as soon as I add that crimson to it, we'll go almost black. Crimson and Viridian together. And I am mixing it on the paper because I personally really like that. You never quite know what's going to happen. And here's a really lovely free way of making it run. So here's a water spray. I'm just going to spray that and see what happens. Look at that. All the colours are running. Gorgeous. And it does it quite quickly. So if you're on a time limit, that's important. Going to make this really dark here. Viridian, and again I'm going to add a little bit of crimson in there to make it really strong, like that. Then I want a little bit of this green going round the side. I'm going to turn it round because I personally find this easier, you know, to get into the nooks and crannies. So if I just put the green around there, I can get that out quite quickly. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to encourage that over there, wet in wet, and a little bit of Viridian here. There we go, that's lovely. So, as you can see on the photograph, there are more flowers because this is a rhododendron, and it's actually part of other flowers in there. You know, it's got more than one flower, but I was just looking at that one flower. I want this to be a less busy area. I'm going to spray it so the bit of Brusho that is there will show up just one spray at a time. Is that enough? A couple of times just to get that going, maybe a bit more. Oh, look at that. So that makes that go recede into the background. And the reason I can see the flower is that that is lighter. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of colour in there, but not too much. I just want that to be less busy, like that. And then I need to bring this down because I've missed that. This was a mistake, but I can go over it by adding some green. So I'm using Viridian and the Hooker's green together. I'm looking at that negative shape that I was looking at before. I'm going over, look at that. That is gorgeous. Don't worry about it. That is fantastic. That's a happy accident where the colour has just bled in. Don't do this because it will then go brown. We want that to be nice and free. I'm going to help it by adding some water. Look at that. Beautiful. Love it. And then we need to add some stamens. So I'm going to use the watercolour crayon to start with to bring this out like that, to bring some dark stamens coming out. These are quite subtle. And a few of those lines that keep going down the petal. You know, with the crayon, it just kind of glides through. It's really lovely to get those lines in. A really nice way of adding them. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. I need that to dry a little bit before I put the white on, so I'll let that go. Look what's happened here. That's just gorgeous, and it's because I used the spray. It gives really nice texture. The stamens, so they are really dark, look, we've got really almost black there. So again, I need that black, but this time I'm going to mix it in the palette. So I've got Viridian here, I've got the alizarin crimson here. I'm just going to mix those two together and I will get black. Makes a lovely grey. You know, I've done elephants with just those two colours together and it really works well. And I'm going to use a little bit of that whilst I'm waiting for that to dry. I can calm down a bit because it's still got 10 minutes. I was really rushing then, worrying about the time. So I could add a little bit of that grey here and that will make those petals stand out a little bit more. I'll leave that black ready for the stamens when it's drier, but I need it to be drier. Now I'm going to add some Q gold to the green. So I'm going to go round here with Hooker's green, like that. Found a very interesting thing about Hooker's green recently because I really never knew the history behind it, and apparently it was a botanist who whose name was Hooker. So that makes sense with green, doesn't it? I'm going to add that there and I'm going to give it a little bit of a spray again, just so we carry on with that lovely theme of it coming down and being free. Just dab it if it's a bit too wet. And I want some of that golden colour to come over this part of the leaf. So I'm just going to add a little bit of gold, Q gold to that. That's the quinacridone gold in here. So it varies. Look at all the lovely greens we've got in here. And the lovely gold from here and here, it mixes together. So whilst it's still waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to add a little bit of splattering. You know I love splattering. So here we go. I'm going to get some Q gold. It needs to be nice and wet, otherwise it will not work. Like that, really wet. And I'm just going to put a little bit up here. I want the yellow to be reflected in here. So I'm just going to put a little bit, and it's still damp, so I'm getting some really lovely effects there. And I do think I need a little bit of green just at the top to make that petal stand out more. Look how when I make it darker, it makes the petal stand out. So, but I want to keep this area fairly free. The idea is this is the busy bit, this is the quiet bit. And it's really good in a painting to have a busy bit and a quiet bit so that the eye can rest when it's looking around the painting. Now, whilst it's still, I'm going to use the crayon to go round the outside of the petals, thereby getting the petal shape back a bit. So I'm going to pull this colour out. I'm not going to be too careful because the idea of this is a very free painting, and so I'm going to miss a bit on purpose, and I'm going to dip my crayon in the water. This has been dipped in water and that will glide through then. So I'm not being too careful, but I am looking at the photograph to get the idea of the petal shape. It's coming round like that. Then it starts about here and comes round. I need to re-wet it. Let's say I'm going like a double line almost in here. The green will pull in, look, and I get a bit of green coming in, going over the green, in and over. Maybe even two lines will do it. I'm going to go over the green, look, so I'm over the red. So I'm being fairly careless, if you like, with the drawing. That provides a really lovely free drawing over the top and fits with the loose painting that we're wanting here. Make that petal stand out a little bit more. Add some water, but I've got brusho on, so it's really a lot of colour on there. So I don't want to go too far with that. Then, still waiting for it to dry really before I can put these lines on. I'm going to dab it a bit just to help it dry. And you will notice that on my picture I've used white ink, and it was damp when I did it because I had to do the practice in 30 minutes as well. I nearly said 30 seconds, and that really would be hard. Now I'm going to use this lovely brush. I love these brushes. Again, I was really pleased when the SAA brought these out. It's a 00 tiny detailer, and it's very fine. Look at that, really fine. So I can get incredibly fine lines. What I do suggest is when you're using it, you get blobs of water, and they can go into that. If you're holding it like this, you can almost see that water coming down there, look, and that will eventually arrive there and go into the paint, and then you can have blobs. So it's important to make sure that you just dry off around the metal bit. Excuse me. So I'm now going to get some ink. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I'm just going to get some white ink on this fine detailer and start with a few lines. I'm holding my hand up because this is really wet, so if you are working in that 30-minute window, then we need to help. So it's almost using my arm like a marl stick. If I hold it like this, it can help me to get to it without putting my hand in the wet paint. There's another tip. So I'm going to go down and do one. I need to do it all in one, so one line coming down, just using the end of the brush. And actually it has dried quite well down the end. Now because it's really dark there, this light is showing up and it's rather nice. Do look at the photograph and you can see that they are all different sizes. We've got short ones and long ones because we're looking up at the flower, and so it's the perspective of it. So make some of them longer and some of them shorter. This is a long one, short one there, long one there. Then dry the brush off. I'm going to now get that dark mix that I made. Remember, that's Viridian and Crimson together. And I'm going to print with the brush like this. Look, literally squishing it down, lift off. Squish it down, lift off. Brilliant way of doing these stamens. Just printing. So keep getting new colour so it's nice and strong. And because you've already put the white on, you know where to put these. There is some kind of overlapping here, so I'll just make sure. Now this is drying up a tiny bit, so I'm just going to add a little bit of water so it works better. I'm looking at the photograph, there's one there I need to pop on. And then we've got the stamens, just a few here as well that are overlapping. So I'm looking at the photograph, there's a few together there. And that makes it more natural because that's what it's like, looking at them there exactly as it is. Then I want to just go over this bit because I need that to be darker. So maybe a little bit more of a Viridian just to make that a little bit darker inside. I'm just blobbing it in because it's quite wet actually, so it's doing the wet and wet thing almost by itself. Now if we look at here, we've also got a very light colour here which I've kind of lost a little bit. There is a lot of brushes, so I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen here, but let's try it. And it doesn't matter because this is a practice piece. You can do one later if you want to do it more perfectly. So I'm just going to do a few lines of white along here just to get that lighter. Oh yes, that's working. But it is mixing a little bit with the brushes, so I'm cleaning it and putting some more on there to make that lighter, and then it stands out a bit more. Bit of water just to help that come down with a bit of wet and wet. I love the way that white ink works with watercolour. This is still wet, And this light that's on this leaf has made it almost white. So let's see what happens there. If I just put some white paint on there, white ink rather, and it mixes there and it starts spreading out. It's really rather lovely. It spreads out with a kind of, you know, little tiny veins coming out. Could put some of this down the middle of this leaf and it will do the same, but I need to spray it because it's dried up a little bit. So I'm just going to add a spray just to release it, and then some more of this white on here so that I get that lovely effect.
About 5 minutes, Ali.
Thank you. I'm determined to make it exactly 30 minutes, so I'll keep titivating. It's a challenge. I really didn't think I'd make it at the beginning, but I think we are going to make it. Yes. And you know, if you do any at home of your own 30-minute workshops, send them in, send some photos in, you know, either to Paint and Create magazine or whatever. We'd love to see what you've done. I think a little bit of splattering would be rather nice with the white as well. So I've just got some white ink on there, and we can just add some white splatter to the top here, and it will release that, making it a bit lighter again because it's kind of gone a bit dark. Bit of water on the brush, lovely. And if it goes a little bit on the flower, well, it doesn't really matter because that's really quite nice. Look at that, beautiful. A little bit of white on here, I think, just to make it a bit lighter. A little bit of white on here. It's still a little bit damp, so it's doing that lovely thing that ink does. And look how that then stands out against the green. Now, when I look at the photograph, I can see here that is very dark next to the petal. Tonal values are really important, so I'm now going to make that darker. I'm going to use some of the Viridian, a little bit of that mix that I've already made in there, and just bring this round. If it bleeds, which it probably will, the white may bleed into that, maybe not. Yes, there it's going. And just bring that down. So you can see the crayon is still showing up there. In fact, what would be quite nice is just have a bit of the red crayon in there, just to link the red of the flower into the green subtly. It's all about playing and enjoying it, really. A bit more of this dark will define where this leaf is. And the green crayon through there to get a few veins on. Look at that, such a lovely thing. Works really well, I think. And again, a little bit of green, darker green between these two leaves, but not too much because this is the quieter area. So, got some colour there, add some water, let it bleed out. So it's just giving a little bit of information about what is there, but not too much. Bit darker there still, just to make that stand out. I am playing for time, just to make it exactly 30 minutes. And I think we're nearly there, are we, Gary?
Yeah, probably about
Yeah, okay. So, there we have it. A rhododendron flower, just one flower out of probably about 30 on that flower, I guess. So, thank you very much for joining me. It's been really lovely to have you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Is that exactly 30 minutes? Yes! I hope yours is too.